Hello?
Hello, Richard.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Hey, everybody.
I saw Bernie a second ago. Now he's not there.
I did too, Wade. I think he must have dropped off.
Okay.
Let's give him a minute or two.
Did everybody have a nice holiday?
Yes, I did.
Yes, thank you, Janice. And you?
Yeah, nice and peaceful.
Yeah, that's true. It was quiet.
Yes,
Very-
I did as well.
Very quiet, very quiet.
Okay, I think Bernie's back.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Good
Hi,
evening.
Bernie.
Bernie.
I'm using my desktop, and I usually use desktop in another area. And when I do that, I forget that I don't have video or sound on Zoom from that location. So now I have to use something a little different. So if you bear with me for a moment. How's everyone doing this evening?
Good.
Good.
Well,
How's everyone doing this evening?
Doing great.
Good.
Yours?
Everybody having a nice Christmas so far?
Yeah.
Yes.
Any better?
Yeah. Now we
Oh,
can
there
see
you
you.
go.
Good.
very good.
Who's on with us?
I think everyone's here.
Everybody.
Okay.
Everyone's on.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Janice is on with us, hopefully, and we can get started. And so, Karen, if you could just either co-sign or remind me as to where we are supposed to be at this point. We're looking at making sure that we have our documentation in place, at least the first run on it, so that we can submit that to the general committee. I think that everyone has put down, at least from what I've seen so far, a representation of their points of concern in the forms that we have tried to use. I know I've seen Marie's and also Richard's. I saw something that Janice put together today, and I know that Marilyn had much earlier on put together something. So I think that I just sent something to everyone from what I was referring to. So I think that we have at least a basis for information that we could pull together that is an informed fashion, similar to what some of the other committees are using. Ours may be a little bit more extensive in some cases. And so I think that to start, we are at a place that we need to be for having documentation to hand in. Do we all have a sense of that, or is there some other thought?
Bernie, my email is missing your attachment.
You're missing my attachment?
Yes.
Yeah, mine too.
So yeah, I
I'll
think you forgot to put the attachment.
I'll resend it again. I thought that I did. I'll make sure I send it right now. But so with that in mind, does it seem as though we are in the right place, at least to give you some type of documentation, Karen?
Well, I have received all of the emails as well that you mentioned from the different subcommittee members. I thought today the full subcommittee was going to take a pass through those to discuss and determine what the final recommendations from the subcommittee would be.
And I think that we can do that. I just wanted to make sure that we are all on the same page a bit. Unless someone else feels something different. However, I do think that there are a couple of things that we need to discuss. One is, as in my conversation, I think with Marie and with Richard, we have the policies that we have reviewed, and we also have comments on things that are outside of the policies or in response to the policies, but may not be reflected in the policies and recommendations that we feel should be added, or for policies that may not exist, or parts of the policy that may not exist.
I'm sorry to interrupt everyone, But could I just ask a quick question? I have somebody here that's just, they're identified just as iPhone, and I'm not sure who it is.
Karen, it's probably me. I'm on my computer and my phone.
And I'm on
Oh,
my
okay.
iPhone, so I'm not
I
sure.
was confused. Okay.
It
Yeah,
could
because
be
I
me.
saw you. I saw Janice and then
Yeah.
I saw iPhone.
Yeah, I'm on both.
Okay, very good. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay, thank you. So back to where we were. I do think that we are ready to do that. Am I not correct, everyone?
I think so.
Yeah.
Janice?
Yeah.
So it all now depends on who should go first.
Bernie, I didn't get your attached White Plains.
Yeah, everyone said that. I'm looking to send that right now to everyone again. Give me a moment.
Well, is there an order that these should be in?
If we could take the time to try to review what the order was, but the order was in how we received the first 8 policies. Do you have that in front of you, Marie?
Yeah, so really, yes, I have those. So it doesn't matter really where we start. I'm looking for the booklet.
So let's start at the body worn camera one, I guess. Is that a good place to start?
Sure, why not?
So I sent you all what I put together today.
And so maybe it would help is if for the ones that we've sent in and the ones we covered. So Marie, would you start off?
Okay, so I mean, we've been over this a lot, but
Yes.
I'll start with, what we've all agreed on. I said all officers should be trained and authorized to use the body cam. That was the
Marie?
first. Yes.
I'm sorry. If I would, I'm thinking that we should perhaps maybe just say body worn cameras, because although Taser Axon Flex is the system that they currently use, they may move on from that system in the future, or maybe phased out. So rather than citing a specific system, perhaps just say all officers
Yeah.
shall be trained and authorized to use body worn cameras.
Right. I would say currently the Taser Axon.
Is the system in use. That would be fine.
Okay. 2 or more officers who should be in charge of keeping all things together. I don't know if there is somebody like that now, or if they just, kind of switch off. Everyone should be equipped with the fully functioning body cam during his or her tour of duty. It should be activated during every civilian stop. Whenever there's an incident involving an officer that leads to a civil complaint or action, there should be a negative inference drawn if the body cam is not activated. So, obviously we want to, the bottom line is we want to get them to use it as much as possible. Whenever there's a question of, if one should use it, the default practice should be to activate it. They should be kept for a minimum of a year or until a complaint has been resolved. After I did that, though, there is a chart in the policies that shows how long they keep some of these things depending upon the severity of the incident. But like with homicide investigations, for instance, according to this, they keep them for like 25 years or something. I don't know that they've even had them for that long, but
It says
Um,
permanent.
right, for some of them, yes, yes. Um, and then any officer should immediately report to his commander when there is an incident that is recorded that may result in a civil action or complaint. And the recording should be secured, made available to the DA's office or special prosecutor, if that's the case, the mayor's office and any CCRB. Um, and the recording should be made available to the public unless there is an active ongoing investigation or sensitive matter. And any violations of the procedures shall result in sanctions to the violator or to the department to the appropriate extent. Um, I did not really touch upon like the technical uses. I mean, they do go, they do talk about them, that these things have to be, I guess, what's the word, synced and that kind of stuff. And so I don't know any of the technicalities about how these things are kept. So, I mean, for our purposes, I mean, I don't know.
I have a
Really know.
question. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, she was freezing up.
What's
Sorry.
the question?
No, I was just asked. You mentioned the body cam footage should be available to the public. Any type of condition, or can they just request to see body cam footage from last Thursday?
Right. No, I mean, it would have to be subject to like FOIL rules. They would have to say what, why they want it. But I mean, the presumption should always be to show more than less. And I guess if somebody is involved in it, but again, if there is an active investigation, no, those should not really be made available to the public. A lot of it is, I mean, I don't know what else there would be on it. A lot
No.
of it might just be personal things that somebody, has a beef with.
Yeah, I mean, like for example, if you drive down the street, you see somebody getting pulled over by the police, and you're curious to see what happened. Oh, I want to make a FOIA request for the body cam footage so I can see my neighbor getting pulled over and see why they got pulled over and what the outcome was.
Right, right.
And we know
I
you
mean,
don't
look,
want that to happen.
no, look, as a practical matter, anybody who really does have a beef is probably going to record it on their own phone. But yeah, I mean, there would be, look, I don't know what the details would be as far as, the procedure for making these things available to the public. But, they should be to some extent, at least. They shouldn't be, um, locked in a room where nobody could ever see them if there is a need. And obviously there are plenty of times, there are good reasons why people would want to see them.
Well, I mean, maybe it's really relevant if there is, say, a complaint of police misconduct, which, outside where it would have to be turned over anyway in a criminal proceeding. But there's say a citizen makes a complaint that, police behavior was biased, or they used, they were rude, or they used excessive force, or something like a citizen complaint, then presumably the citizen should have access to that, as well as the general issue of citizen complaints that I think will come up in the personnel complaint policy that Bernie's been looking into. I mean,
Right.
it seems like that is the
Look, if there is
place
a CCRB,
where you want them available to the.
Yeah, that makes that. I mean, they should be available to a CCRB or to whoever was maybe even the person filing complaint can see it once the case is resolved, whatever. But I don't think it should be available for anybody. Just go in there, and I want to just be nosy and see you know, I want to watch my neighbor being stopped, or my girlfriend or boyfriend, or my ex-wife, whatever. You don't want it to get to that point where people are just going every day just to look at body cam footage of police stops.
Not only that, but what we should be worried about is that, you know, let's suppose that we don't like somebody, we could get the police footage of it and put it online.
True.
You know, that's
True.
a
Yeah.
really big problem. I mean, you know, you're like, oh great, you know, my ex-wife, blah blah blah. You know, I'm going through a divorce. Let me just like upload this so everybody can see it. You know, I really think that's a bad idea.
Well, I guess we could, I could reword that somewhat to say that any such recording would be made available to, I guess, an involved party or an interested party and or his attorney, if there is a complaint that's been filed. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, for complaints, that's one thing, but it just, you know, just by being curious, that's a whole different matter.
Right, right. So that could be easily amended.
And the
So
DA's
recording should,
office would receive the body worn camera footage if it is part of an active case for them, investigation. Patrick?
I'm not sure if the police are going to give it over, or our office would consent, depending on what the status of the investigation is. Because on
Right,
FOIL,
well,
they won't, on a pending
That's right.
investigation, FOIL won't allow them to grant access to it.
Oh yeah, she's already got on their list as an active investigation, which I think what you mean is an active criminal investigation.
yes.
But you know, it could be turned over if it relates to, you know, a citizen complaint for a matter which is not under active criminal investigation.
Right.
Right, but Marie is also saying in the recommendations that when an officer records an incident that he believes may result in a civil action or complaint, the officer shall immediately report, and then the recording shall be secured and report of its contents shall be made available to the DA's office.
I mean, it kind of says that already, the first part, that if there's an incident that someone reasonably believes may result in a complaint, that he or she should notify a supervisor. I added immediately, and that the recording should be secured and made available to the DA's office, the mayor's office, and any complaint review board. So that's what I added, but apparently now they're supposed to turn it over anyway. There's not really a time frame though that's in the policies.
For
So,
civil complaints, civil actions, or they would just turn over for criminal?
yeah, what says civil complaints? Yes, a civil complaint or like a civil action if they're suing the police. Where's that? And obviously any and I guess that is that's for the purpose of maybe an incident where an officer is shown in a negative light. Obviously, if that would be the reason why somebody would file a complaint, is if the officer is doing something that he shouldn't be doing. So, you know, I guess this would put a duty upon the officer to report it right away. I guess, you know, before somebody else can be, you know, ideally before somebody will file a complaint against them. Does that make sense?
Okay, so how is it written now as far as like when the officer finishes for the day, the video for his entire shift is downloaded into the database, correct?
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
not
it
familiar with
says
the
that.
policy. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. It says that they have to download it at the end of the shift
Okay, and then that's held for a certain amount of time, unless
Yeah,
there's
they
a,
download and tag it, and then it goes to the records unit, who will upload it if there's a case to associate it with. If there's not, it just goes into the cloud storage system. When I spoke to the records unit, if there is not a case that is associated, meaning just a regular run-of-the-mill, no criminal case, they'll keep it for 4 years.
okay,
And if it's applied to a criminal case, then they keep it basically permanently.
okay. So during that
And
4
so
years,
when does that get, so an officer comes in and he registers the video. If the complaint doesn't come in for 2 or 3 weeks, how does that video then get tied back to the complaint?
It comes through a police incident
Well,
number.
right now, yeah, if you look at the policy right now, in the booklet, it says, whenever an officer records an incident or any portion of an incident which that officer reasonably believes will lead to a civil complaint or civil action, the officer shall immediately bring it to the attention of his or her supervisor. So I
Yeah,
guess
but I think even if he
gives them
doesn't, what I think what
Yeah, what I'm asking is if he doesn't, the video gets registered, the officer doesn't bring up the issue to his supervisor, but later, 2 weeks later, a complaint or complainants come in and register a
Right.
complaint about some action that an officer or group of officers have made. How does that video get reassociated with this particular incident?
I mean,
Or
I'm
complaint?
sure, yeah, I'm sure they just go into the database and put, Thursday, March 15th at 3
Just like they
PM.
do with
Right.
911,
Yeah,
correct.
they can pull it.
Same thing.
Yeah,
Location, date, time, whatever gets the closest in that sector. Then they go by what officers were assigned to that sector and they can piecemeal it back.
Right.
right, they're going to do that all the time when it comes to, you could have an officer who was in a particular location, walking down the street or driving a patrol car, and 15 minutes later a bomb goes off. They're going to pull the body cam from anybody who was in that area, just like they would a surveillance video on a bodega.
Right. But Pat, maybe you know the answer to this. Is there one officer now who is in charge of, keeping these records? I know there's that technology.
There's the records unit that, because of the discovery that came
Officer.
with criminal cases, they poured in a bunch of people into that unit. So it's Lieutenant Drago who oversees it, with Sergeant Podesta, Detective Rothman, and then they've assigned 3 additional officers who deal with the body camera. So there's 3 supervisors and 3 officers.
Okay.
And just as a point of information, this is not the professional standards group, is it?
No, it's different.
No, they're just the records unit. They're in charge of keeping
Okay.
and maintaining.
Right. So, I mean, if anybody else has questions to add to it, I could certainly do that and resend it.
Yes. Sounds good, and we should, does anybody else have anything to add? Or can we move on to the next?
yeah, I mean, just to tie it up, my thing is, the body cam policy, as long as they turn the camera on, the footage is being stored, that right there is 99% of the battle. If this man wants to make a complaint, they have 4 years to get it out of the cloud. After that, it goes away unless there's a criminal investigation or as part of a case. So, the main thing is making sure it's turned on when it has to be turned on. Because like that thing that just happened, it was in the news recently, this past week. I forgot where, but the officers shot a man and they turned the body cams on after the shooting. The guy was in his garage, coming out of his garage with his cell phone, and the police shoot and kill him, and they turned the body cam footage on after the shooting. They were responding to a suspicious person call, so they should have turned it on as soon as they got out their cars. But
Let me ask a question. If there's and it wasn't in here, But if you're dealing with a citizen, are they supposed to inform the citizen that they're wearing a body cam? Is that a policy of theirs?
I don't know, off the top of my head. I don't know. I haven't seen the policy.
I mean, there's nothing about that in the stuff that we were given. I just wonder if they do it anyway as a matter of course, or if there's a reason why you would not want to do it. Why you would not want to let, somebody know that they're being recorded.
It says, in sensitive situations, as in domestic violence incidents, child abuse, and sexual assaults, the officer will announce the recording is deactivated once order has been restored.
From watching a bunch of them, they don't always announce, but it's kind of clear because you can just see from people's reactions, the light from the camera that it's emitting. They start waving at the camera and things of that nature. So, but they don't announce that you're being recorded, that the body camera is activated.
It also says in the policy, in public or private, while it is generally implied that words and/or actions performed in the presence of a police officer have no expectations of privacy, when practical and safe under circumstances to do so, officers shall verbally announce when the, I would think, camera is in event mode.
Oh, where are you reading that from, Karen?
Page 2 or page 3, number 6, under use.
Oh, okay. I
Heading
see that.
use.
Yep.
Yeah, it also says under 3 under use. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shall be placed into event mode as soon as practical. Yes.
We'll announce
And
this. Yeah.
activated.
Yeah.
Right.
So that makes sense.
So, I mean, I guess the policy should be that, we want to encourage the police to use, the body cams as much, whenever they can, whenever it's practical to be used, to foster transparency and accountability. I mean, they may come up, there may be different ways of achieving that goal, but that's obviously the main goal, is to use them as much as possible and to keep them, and to keep them for a long time so that they are available.
So Marie, how do you propose to change the policy about making them public? I mean, what wording do you think?
Well,
You
I
want to
think,
put in?
I think we could say something like recording should be made available to, I guess, an interested party or a party who is involved in the situation, or his attorney, when there has been a civil complaint filed, or even if they're
You mean a civil complaint, or do you
obviously
mean like
criminal at
a
somebody.
you mean a civil complaint as in litigation, or you mean a complaint against like
Well,
a
either,
disciplinary complaint?
I think either one. If you have a complaint about an officer on the street, I mean, you might not sue the police department because of it, but you might want to see the footage in case you do want to,
Okay.
in case you
So I
decide
just
that
think
you may want
we
to.
should have language in there that we can agree on, is all I'm saying. I mean,
Right.
we don't necessarily need to have it now, but we have to maybe agree on something, because I do think it's a concern that we don't, the policy now is that these things shouldn't be made public because they can be, embarrassing and an invasion of people's privacy. But we don't want the police to be able to shut off access to video of police misconduct happening such as, an excessive force incident or, some objectionable behavior. But I just think we have to have the right language in there.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, I'll tighten it up, but right now I just wrote, I will write in that they should be made available to, I guess, an interested party, I guess by request, uh, I don't know, who would you request it from? A police captain?
Well, is that another one of those black boxes for the Office of Professional Standards? It gets requested from, does it get requested from a supervisor? That needs to be further defined in general, I think, across the board for everything where we have a complaint process or a process of procedure that needs to be followed up on.
Maybe the chief or his designee. Right now to be the chief, he's the commander of the department.
Right.
And if he designates the sergeant of the records division be the person, that will be the person. But we can just, for now, the chief or whoever he designates.
Okay, I mean, we could say, upon showing of good cause or something along those lines. So-
I just think it can be like that, just to limit it to, when there is a citizen complaint of police misconduct, the citizenship shall be permitted access to this, such video, except if there is an objection from law enforcement or from the district attorney's office that there's an active criminal investigation or something like that.
Okay, but I'll work on it. I'll reword it and
Something like that.
add it.
And then Marie, the last thing that I have that I've from the beginning felt was should not be as part of the policy is the use of a particular brand name for a body worn camera, which they use Taser, Axon, Flex.
Right.
That should be removed, and it should just be body worn camera or
Right.
yeah.
Karen said that in the beginning, so that's fine. Okay.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah, let's go to the next.
Okay.
Okay, so the next, do we want to tackle field stops?
Okay. Okay. So I sent around something on this. So I don't know if everybody has in front of them the Word document that I sent that says field stops Rex. The first part of it has to do with the general policy. And so what I think we want to suggest is that the policy in general is we want to make the officers sensitive to the fact that the way in which they stop and question people can provoke a negative reaction. It's unnecessary. And because, we want to not have officers act rudely in general, and B, we want people to feel that they want to make or cooperate with law enforcement in the inappropriate circumstances. It's important that officers understand, as I wrote here, that being stopped and questioned can cause people to feel singled out because of their race or nationality, and they should approach people politely and respectfully. That's just not in the current policy. So, although it's kind of a mushy It's not, too specific. I just think that in general would be good to have. So that's the first thing. I don't know how you feel about that. Any comments about that?
Officer must understand being stopped, questioned can cause people to feel singled out because their race, approach people politely. Is this an assumption, Wade? That it,
What's that? I mean, I guess that's, like when I mentioned procedural justice, this is all part of that. As long as people feel the police officers is treating them fairly, is doing his job without having any prejudicial reasoning behind it. Give the person a voice. Don't just say, "Hey, shut up, put your hands up, get it." There's a way to stop people, and it's hard to put into words how to behave that way. It's sort of a just being, polite and treating people like human beings, and that's all part of the procedural justice training or the process that we spoke about earlier. Fairness, transparency, and impartiality in decision making. So if you got a situation where you're looking for, the bank was just robbed, they're looking for, a male, whatever, black with a red hoodie on and black sneakers and blue jeans, and you see somebody fit that description, instead of just say you fit the description, just say, listen, hey, there was a bank robbery. The witnesses said the person was wearing A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and you're wearing the same thing. At least the person knows, I fit the description. You tell me why, rather than saying I fit the description. Because too many times they'll be in a situation where they say a person fit the description, and the description was a male Hispanic with blue jeans on and a gray hoodie. You got a male black with black jeans on and a red hoodie. So if it's all about fairness and being transparent. So that's basically, I don't know how you could put that into words. That's all part of training and having the right person doing the policing, but that would justify, that would help with the stops.
Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah, so
definitely training.
So during the current policy just says, during field interviews, police personnel will conduct themselves with integrity, professionalism, and respect, and upon completion, make every effort to explain the reason for the field stop to the subject in question without compromising an active investigation. So, I mean, that's not wrong, but I just think that, maybe we could just emphasize that, that officers should be sensitive to the way they're perceived, and they can still, if they people with, being polite and respectful, even if they might end up arresting them, I think it's going to be better in the long run. So I just think that we want to put some language. We could change the language I have, but
yeah. And you mentioned at the completion of the stop. Maybe they don't have to wait for the completion. They can give them that information right up front.
Yeah, I just read what's in the general policy now.
Okay, I'm saying that's something we can look at changing. Instead of saying at the completion, as soon as safe to do so, advise the person of the stop while you're stopping them.
Yeah. Okay. So do you well, so you see the recommendation that I have there. So you want to add that officers should
the way the last sentence, at the completion of the stop, I believe you said the officer is supposed to explain to them the circumstances. I would change that to saying, as soon as safely possible, advise the person of the circumstances of the stop. If you're chasing somebody, you're not going to tell them. But if you stop the person and now to avoid a confrontation, at that point, if it's safe to do so, explain to him why you're stopping him or her.
Okay. How about this? Okay, so I've added, officers should make an effort to explain as soon as safely possible the reason for the stop.
Perfect.
Okay. So the next policy, the next
But are
thing
you
is,
taking out the? Go
no,
ahead.
unless you want me to.
Okay.
So-
No,
So I just added that other sentence, the third sentence. I'm moving on now to 2B. We talked about this. 2B incorrectly describes a standard for forcible stops. I don't know if you want to go over this again, but we talked about this. This is, 2B describes reasonable suspicion as when an officer reasonably suspects criminal behavior exists, which can be based on past articulated experiences. I don't know where that came from. That is, I'm just going to say it's wrong. Okay, I might have another word for it, but I'm just going to say it's wrong. So that's why we want to just, I think we all agreed that that this subparagraph should just be deleted. And so, do you want to discuss that anymore, or should we move on?
Richard, I'm sorry. Which one are you reading now?
This is 12-102 forcible stop, section 2B on page 1.
Okay. And your
Okay, so
recommendation is that we delete that whole subparagraph?
subparagraph 2B.
Should be deleted.
Okay, yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Because A, that's what it is. Reasonable suspicion is reasonably suspecting that a person has committed, is committed, is or about to commit a crime, basically. They have it more complicated, any felony or penal law misdemeanor. That just means a crime. That's it. End of story. Stop right there. That's it.
Okay.
Okay. And they have this other thing, which is, I don't know where they got that from. That's just wrong.
Okay.
So, okay. And then, so the next thing is the law regarding frisk. This is on page 2, 12103, paragraph 2. So turning to 12103, paragraph 2, it says, you may frisk a person if you reasonably suspect you are in danger or that a weapon is present. All violent felons, those using weapons or force, can be frisked. This is just wrong. I mean, not all stops lead to frisk. That's fine. But, this other business about describing when you can frisk for a weapon is just wrong. It's just wrong. Okay. It's, pretty straightforward. Frisk is only permitted when there's reasonable suspicion, like I said before, that the person is or is about to commit a crime, and that the person is armed and dangerous. Full stop. There's nothing that says the officer suspects he is, quote, in danger, right? That's not it. Unless he reasonably suspects the person he's about to frisk is armed and dangerous. So if I feel I might be in danger because their Muslim terrorists might blow up the country, you never know, that's not good enough, okay? It's got to be the person who I'm about to frisk. I think I have reason to believe this person might be armed and dangerous. And also, you can't just frisk somebody because you think they've committed a violent felony, unless you reasonably suspect the person is armed and dangerous. So, that part of the subparagraph is wrong, and it should be deleted. I mean, the only part of it that's really okay is not all stops lead to frisk. Okay, and so that's what I think about that. Any thoughts?
No, I think we all agree.
we've been over
Yeah.
this several times.
Yeah, I put in the policy here, I quoted from People versus DeBoer, which is, the case that, that Maria and Patrick are probably familiar with. That's the case everybody always refers to for what, these levels of intrusion. Okay, and then moving on, the law regarding frisk, also on page 2103, law regarding frisk. It talks about searching bags and containers. Okay, now that's just wrong again. You have to when you're frisking somebody and you have a reasonable suspicion that they might be armed and have committed a crime, and they're holding a bag like a purse, you can touch the outside of the bag or even move it around and see if you can tell there's a handgun in there or some other weapon. And if you do, then you could open it. But you can't search the bag. You can't open the bag and start searching the bag, unless you have already found from touching it that it feels like there's something in there that's a weapon. And actually, even if you arrest the person, there are limits on when you can search incident to arrest. That is, the bag has to be in a grabbable area or immediate control, and you have to reasonably believe the suspect could gain possession of the weapon or conceal evidence to destroy evidence in the bag, which is called an exigent circumstance. So anyway, paragraph 3 is wrong because it says that they can search a bag or container as part of a stop and frisk, and that's just not really the case. Okay, so that needs to be changed. So
again, that goes to training too.
yeah, but these are training materials, right? I mean, this is presumably what the new cops have to read when they're learning how to do frisks or searches in the White Plains Police Department. They look in the book, right?
I hope it's more
Presumably
than this, but
well, right, but I mean, the book is like the sort of like the patrol guide in New York City. This is like what you're supposed to follow, when you're conducting police operations.
Yeah, from
And
my understanding, this is what they get. This is part of their training from when they go to the academy. Part of the training from the academy is that they go through policies and procedures, not only from what's general within the academy, but they're also associated with the policies of the department that they're going to work in. So, Richard, you're right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's part of that.
I mean, look, I would think that the district attorney's office would want to have the right policy being taught to police officers in Westchester County, because if a police officer says, well, the policy told me that I could search the guy's bag, and then it winds up that the evidence gets suppressed, that they're going to lose out in that prosecution. So we want police officers to not to violate people's Fourth Amendment rights, A, to preserve people's Fourth Amendment rights, and B, if they do, there's a pretty good chance the evidence is going to be suppressed and they won't be able to use it to prosecute that person.
I just want to make sure that their policy is not based on like state laws, because I like you mentioned the county police academy. They train the entire county on pretty much, state laws, but they're not training the Portchester cop on Portchester policies and procedures, the White Plains cop on White Plains policies and procedures, the Greenberg cops, and so on. They're training overall, state, laws, policies, procedures, criminal procedure law, penal law, etc. So I just want to make sure that we have to make sure that this policy is not based on a state standard.
It isn't. It's the opposite.
Yeah, but
okay. If it's opposite, then yeah, okay.
But Wade, isn't part of what they from my reviewing the video, and from what I understand, part of the training in the academy is that they get to participate in the department that they're going to be in or that they're working from, that they have to become familiar with the rules and regulations in that department. And if so, isn't this part of that process?
No, you're right. You spend your time in the academy, and then during that time in the academy, I believe it's 1 or 2 weeks to go back to your home department to work for training. Then when you finish the academy, you go back to your department for follow-up training. So they don't
Right.
just throw you in the street after the academy.
Right. So I would believe that this is a fundamental thing that officers should be trained on once they're in it. Once they come back for that whatever brief time, they come back to their home department, and then follow up when they're finally finishing the academy. This should be primary and basic for their training, correct?
Yeah. And as long as it doesn't go against the state process. But if White Plains is being more lenient than the state process, then we should go with the one that's a little more protects this society a little better.
Yeah, so the problem is that the White Plains policy permits frisks and bag searches, for example, you could say in violation of state law.
Okay, then
That's the problem.
It has to be addressed.
Yeah.
So Richard, the recommendation is that we recommend that they stop the frisking and searching?
No. The idea is that when it comes to frisking, it can only be done if it complies with, the standard under the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution and the New York State Constitution, which say that the courts have interpreted to mean that you can't do a frisk of somebody unless, again, you believe they've committed a crime. I'll just shortcut it. And they're reasonable suspicion that the person is armed and dangerous. Those are the only circumstances where a police officer can conduct a stop and frisk.
Okay.
Right. So that's one policy. And then the other thing that I brought up is that this business of searching a bag as part of a stop and frisk is not actually permitted, but not that you could, and you had reasonable suspicion that she is armed and dangerous, you could touch the outside of the purse to see if you feel a handgun in there. But if you don't feel a handgun in there, and what you feel probably a cell phone, or even if what you feel might be glassines of heroin, you're not allowed to search that person's bag, right? Because you're searching for a weapon. You're touching the thing to see if it contains a weapon. If you don't feel a weapon, you can't go in that bag.
Good point.
Okay, so there are a couple of ways. Anyway, so that's it for field stops.
Yes.
The only thing I added was business about officers should make an effort to explain as soon as possible the reason for the stop. Do we want to move on to a different policy now?
Yes, unless anyone else has something to add to that. And from what I understand, Karen, we're going to lose you if we haven't already.
I'm here. I have until about 7:30, 7:45.
Okay.
Okay, what next policy do you want to do?
You have, what was next that you had? I'm trying to.
Response to resistance?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so you want to turn to the document that says response to resistance Rex. And this refers to the response resistance policy 89-01. So the current policy says all members will not use unnecessary or excessive force, and I'm proposing that we change the wording to say that the use of excessive force is prohibited and illegal. It's just a different emphasis. It just says don't, the current policy says don't use it, okay? And what we want to say is it's against the law. Don't do
Yeah,
it,
I like that.
okay? And I just think we just want to emphasize that it's not something that, you could use or not use. It's something that is prohibited. So that's the first recommendation that we have. So any questions on that one? Anyone disagree?
It's a good one.
Yeah. The next one has to do with the definitions. And here, we've talked about this before. The policy talks about that a response to resistance, the use of force, is justified under this Graham standard. And that's a standard that is the one that's used when somebody sues the police. And the Supreme Court of the United States in this case from 1989 said that, you have to look at the police without the benefit of 20/20 hindsight and based on the totality of the facts known to the officer at the time he shot the person to death or used force. And so it makes it very difficult for people to actually sue the police or say the city, under 1983 Civil Rights Action. But what we are saying, or I think we should be saying, is that the officers must avoid the use of excessive force and only use force when its use is appropriate and reasonable. And we shouldn't confuse, how they might be liable if they get sued with, or how the city would be liable from the policy, which is don't do it. Don't use excessive force. Use force when it's appropriate and reasonable. And I just don't think that we want that reference. So that's the first recommendation. If they want to teach about Graham versus Connor and how you might be liable, under that more lenient standard, I guess that's okay. But the policy should be, don't do it. Just as when it talks about, if you look at the next one about this reference to the justification defense, it's true that under New York law, that there are certain defenses for a police officer who uses excessive force. It's called a justification defense. But even if the officers could defend themselves, if they were criminally charged, the police department can have policies limiting physical force that are just limited to where it's reasonable and necessary to prevent the loss of life or a threat to human life or something like that, especially when it comes to deadly physical force. So, I just think that, this is why I've suggested officers should be taught that the use of excessive force can be prosecuted under, the federal law as well, just to emphasize it's important not to do it.
Okay,
So
so that's pretty much like for training purposes, just to so officers know that, hey, don't just think the state laws are what we have to live by. There's also federal guidelines that you have to, you have to consider when you're using force.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, in a trial that took place here in federal court in White Plains against corrections officers who were convicted of violating the Civil Rights Act, the government offered an evidence proof that that in the training for corrections officers, it referred to Title 18 United States Code, Section 241, or conspiracy to violate civil rights, as proof that they knew that they shouldn't be doing it.
Okay.
They actually introduced the training materials at the trial. So, I think that's, it emphasizes to officers that, there's lots of good reasons not to do this. Like it's a crime, and, it'd be much better if, you didn't have to hire a lawyer and possibly go to prison. So the next one has to do with the duty to intervene. And it says that any member observing, the current policy, any member observing force that is clearly beyond that which is objectively reasonable under the circumstances. And I just think we want to make this much similar. Why do we want to refer to this Graham standard? I just think we want to say any officer or any member present and seeing another member using excessive force shall, when in a position to do so, safely intervene to prevent the use of such excessive force. I mean, that's enough. We don't need to get into this because, what is, you want the officers to say, well, I don't know if this is objectively reasonable. Is it clearly beyond that which is objectively reasonable? Why make it more complicated than it needs to be? So this is under the duty to intervene on page 2.
H2,
Yeah, duty to intervene.
okay.
The difference is clearly beyond that which is objectively reasonable under the circumstances. And, just, when somebody is using excessive force, like we know it when we see it, okay? I mean, of course, there's judgment involved, but if you see somebody kicking something, like laying prostrate on the ground and an officer is kicking him in the head, I don't think that there's any, dispute about that. That's, like the Rodney King beating where all the, like 6 officers are hitting the guy with a baton at one time when he's already been handcuffed, okay? That's using excessive force. And we want the police officers to know that if one of the other officers does this, they're supposed to say, hey, cut it out. Stop it.
My thing is, it's not the fact that officers, we want the officers to stop the excessive force. So instead of digging into language about the excessive force, what, dictates what force is excessive, my thing is either the old definition or your definition. The thing is, we have to make sure the officers intervene. That's the bottom line. So that, to me, that's what we should focus more on.
We have to make sure that, wait, could you repeat that? What did you say? The officers?
I'm saying we should focus more on the officer's responsibility to intervene. They have to intervene. It's not,
Well, yeah.
Both definitions work as far as what is excessive force, but the bottom line is at the end of the day, we want to make sure that either your definition or the old definition, to me, they're so similar. The officer has to intervene. That should be the primary focus of this, this recommendation, I think, just to make sure that that guy standing over there watching, he didn't do anything, he's in trouble too.
Yeah. Well, that's why, it says, the policy that currently says, any member present and observing another member using force that is clearly beyond that which is objectively reasonable under the circumstances, shall, when in a position to do so, safely intercede to prevent the use of such excessive force. And I just think that's more complicated than it. We could just say any member present and observing another member using excessive force shall, when in a position to do so, safely intercede to prevent the use of excessive force. Because if you have this business about clearly beyond that which is objectively reasonable under the circumstances, then you're forcing the police officer to think about, well, wait a minute, is this subjectively reasonable under the circumstances? Is it clearly beyond that which is objectively reasonable? It just makes it much more likely that an officer is going to say, well, I don't know, I was confused about whether it was clearly beyond that which is objectively reasonable under the circumstances. If you just say, hey, you see a guy using excessive force, stop him.
Yeah, but there's stages of excessive force. Like you mentioned Rodney King. That's way over the top. But there's small things that happen that fit into that, the language that's now the reasonable language, because it can be something so small that it's not really super excessive to everybody. One person may say, hey, no, that's not right. I'm going to stop that. 3 other guys may say, no, I don't see a problem with that. So I don't know. It's kind of tough.
So you're saying, Wade, that I could have an officer who talks very gruff and abruptly to somebody, almost to the point of shaming them, and another officer may look at that person and say, that's not excessive.
Yeah, it's all subjective. I mean, like putting handcuffs. So one person may put the handcuffs extra tight on the guy, and another person may just say, hey, that's too tight. Another person say, no, that's how you're supposed to do it. This way they can't get their hands out. I mean, there's so many different levels of excessive force.
I think the idea here is that we don't want cops to necessarily intervene in every little thing like that, like what you're saying, Wade. They put the handcuffs on too tight. But obviously, when there's an incident where someone is clearly in danger of serious bodily harm or even death, then yes, absolutely, there should be a duty to intervene no matter what. I mean, verbal abuse, I don't know I don't think that's considered excessive force.
No.
I don't think it's not force at all. So, we don't need to cover like every possible situation, but I agree with Richard, make it as easy, as easy as possible or as simple as possible, so that it gives officers less discretion.
Exactly.
I don't think anybody's going to complain that, Officer A didn't report Officer B because he was, being verbally abusive or just being a jerk or, something like that. Or
Well, that's dealt with in the unbiased policing. That's a different subsection, right? We have, if somebody says something, say racist to somebody, right? I mean, they're supposed to report that too, but that's a different policy, I think.
right.
Yeah, but
I mean,
suppose it's not racist.
Right.
Suppose you have an officer who encounters a husband and a wife in a dispute, and then because he's a male chauvinist, he treats the woman extremely poorly without regards, and actually causes her to feel even more put upon. I think that it's easy to downplay the thought that that verbal command cannot be excessive, but in certain circumstances it can be.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah, well, that goes toward showing, disrespect, and the whatever the principles in the sanctity of life, writings.
So I think that we can march on past this. Are we all comfortable with where this is right now? We could move on to what the next. Richard, you want to just move on?
Sure. Okay. So let me just get back to where I was as I was looking at something else. Okay. So now under the duty of intervention, under page 2, duty to intervene, it says, current policy says members shall report these observations to a supervisor, and what I'm suggesting is that if there is an incident where somebody is sees excessive force being employed, they should also report it to, and I'm suggesting the Office of Professional Standards, the Chief of Police, the mayor, and any CCRB. I mean, I'm open to who should receive it, but we're talking here about a report of the use of excessive force. And what I'm suggesting is that, yes, we want it to go to internal affairs, which is professional standards, and the chief of police, but we would certainly want it to go to a civilian complaint review board. And failing that, I'm suggesting that it should go to civilian authority, which is outside the police department, such as the mayor, because that person is responsible. The chief of police is not elected in this city. So we want elected officials to have notice of and know about incidents of excessive or alleged incidents of excessive force that are reported by a member of the police department. So police officer A sees police officer B using excessive force, beating the hell out of somebody when he shouldn't be doing it. I'm saying that there should be a report to the CCRB if we have one, and then if we don't, at least to the mayor as well as to internal supervisors. So that's what I'm suggesting.
Patrick, let me ask you this question now. Is this something where the DA's department would possibly get involved in processing an issue of this type?
I don't think Patrick's on anymore.
I don't think Patrick's on.
Oh, okay.
But I got a question. I think something like, right now it looks like we are going towards definitely recommending a CCRB, and they will review every investigation that the professional standards investigates. Finding substantiated, unsubstantiated. They're going to review each and every case. So I would probably recommend that the officer who observes, someone doing something wrong, to report it to either or, the sergeant, the mayor, the chief, the captain, professional standards. They should have the option to report to anybody. I wouldn't say that person has to report to everybody, or just you got to report it 5 times. I'm saying once it's reported.
Right. I mean that once it's reported, it should be passed on to, either you reported to the supervisor, but then internally in the police department, it would then go to these other people and,
Exactly.
And the CCRB. I mean, I don't mean that the police officer himself has to do the sending of it.
So, but this is where a complaint process needs to be in place, as is for civilians, but also for officers internally. I think that the complaint process itself does actually supposedly cover this, although it's not spelled out well, and it doesn't go to any outside agency, as you're saying, Richard. But it should be the same type of resource for complaint on either side, correct?
I'm not sure what I understand what you mean.
Well, so we're saying that the officer needs to be responsible for reporting this to some entity, whether it be a CCRB or to the mayor's office or even to the DA. The accountability for the complaint itself needs to go someplace. And if there's not a CCRB and it needs to get to the mayor, or it needs to get to whomever outside, there needs to be some way to account for it. And there is no accountability for it as it stands now.
Well,
that's right.
Right now it's supposed to go to professional standards, and then they do the report. Then the chief reviews it. So it's just those 2 entities.
Right. I mean, if a police officer has a complaint about another officer, that should be, I guess, reported in-house first.
Yeah.
before
Yeah, but it is
goes-
reported in-house first. It may even go to a sergeant or a supervisor first before even getting to the chief. And that individual may decide on whether or not it was sufficient enough to be pushed up to the chief of police. The supervisor could say, okay, this is, I'll handle this at this level. I'll be responsible for this person's activity, and I'll account for how they are to be trained more, trained better, or given some warning about their behavior. But in that happening, it's all internal and it doesn't get recorded on a regular basis. You can have an officer doing this 4 or 5 times across the board within a month, and there's no way to see the consistency of it unless there's some system that you can respond to or refer to that see that that's happening.
No, and it's funny. I think I saw on someone else's recommendation page what was just said about the sergeant having the authority to end it with him and not going any further. And I think it should be, if it does end with the sergeant, say something very minor, and the sergeant addresses it and ends it, that should still be reported to the professional standards just for their records. Like, because it's a situation that was a complaint filed by a civilian that, it could be anything. It could be the guy when the officer pulled me over, he was yelling at me. He wasn't polite, and he listened to the body cam. And he heard the guy yelling because he just had a bad day at home, whatever. Who knows what the officer went through that day?
Yeah.
So something like that may not be something the officer can be suspended on. I might just be, hey, listen, Joe, just if you're having a bad day, come see me. You don't take it out in the public. So that might be something that sergeant handles, but it should still be documented with the professional standards in case it happens again and again and again. At least I have a track record so they can take a little more authority on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you look at page 4, investigation, on the response to resistance policy, it says professional standards will conduct an investigation on all complaints where the use of excessive physical force was alleged to be involved, and that the recommendations will be handled by professional standards and forwarded to the chief of police when completed. But the problem is that back on page 2, where it talks about the duty to intervene, it just says gets reported to a supervisor. So it doesn't actually say the supervisor has to send it on to,
Gotcha.
professional standards. So we just want to make it clear that, this complaint has to be passed on to professional standards, the chief of police, and either some kind of civilian authority, whether it's the mayor's office, if we don't have a CCRB, or to a CCRB, just for the idea that the public will understand that complaints of excessive force, whether made by a civilian or by another officer who observes it, will not be swept under the rug, that civilian authority to the internal Office of Professional Standards and the police chief will learn about this and at least be aware of it, so that if somebody brings it up at the a city council meeting or something like this, the civilian authority is not blindsided. Well, we don't know anything about this, and I think that this might help engender some more confidence in the community that there's actually somebody looking at those kinds of incidents if they were to happen in our city.
No, it's good. I like that. It's more about
Does the-
accountability.
Does the
Transparency.
person who's making the complaint have a say in whether somebody can stop it at a certain point or not? Can they say, no, I want this to go further? Like if the sergeant says, okay, I handle it, does the person making the complaint, do they have to go by that?
At present, I believe that's the case.
I don't know if we get to run that by the chief or the captain, but I don't know. But in most cases, like I said, it depends on how severe the case is. If it's something minor, like I said, and the sergeant can handle it at that level, but he should still report that this happened to the professional standards and to the chief, rather than just handle it and nobody
Well-
knows about it. Because as a supervisor, if 3 of your cops has all these complaints, you start looking at the supervisor. So he wants to keep his sheep, at bay, keep his problems, low key to help him look good. So I think he should still have to report, hey, I got this complaint in. These are my findings. This is what I did. I spoke to the guy. He had a problem. But if it's something more serious, then professional standards should, no, we're going to take this one. Or the chief may say, no, professional standards is going to handle this one, not you, Sarge.
I think as a practical matter, if a civilian doesn't like the way an investigation is being handled, they would go to a CCRB or even, take it further. So I think that's why, that's one of the reasons that we need a CCRB.
Yeah, but this is for a police officer reporting on another police officer.
Yes, yes, it is.
Oh, well, that's right.
So in
Okay,
this
should we
case,
move on?
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to page 4 now. This is deadly physical force. This is a problem because it permits a police officer to use deadly physical force to arrest a person when the officer reasonably believes that person has committed a felony in which the use or threatened imminent use of a deadly physical force has been used by the suspect. And that's just wrong.
Right.
You're not allowed to just, if you think a person has committed a violent felony, you don't get to kill that person, right? I mean, you have to use deadly physical force only if it's justified by the need to avoid a clear and present danger to the public or the officer, right? You're not entitled.
Yeah.
Right. So this policy is just wrong.
Right. We talked about eliminating it.
How is this compared to Article 35 in the penal law?
Well, Article 35 of the penal law it's 3530 present defense in certain circumstances when a police officer uses deadly physical force. And so let's call up PL 3530. What I'm saying is that defense is not the same as what's justified in using it. So, for example, it says, I'm skipping, hold on. Okay. Deadly physical force may be used, it says, for such purposes that it is when the person has committed a felony or attempt to commit a felony involving the use or attempted physical use against the person. Okay, so this is the defense, or they reasonably believe the person committed kidnapping, arson, escape in the first degree, burglary in the first degree, and so forth. And so, or in the course of such an attempted, the offense committed was a felony, and in the course of resisting arrest, such person is armed with a deadly weapon or firearm, or the use of physical force is necessary to defend the police officer or another person from what the officer reasonably believes to be the use of imminent or deadly physical force. But so the thing is that this provides a defense if a police officer were charged with, say, attempted murder, so maybe charged with attempted murder. But we don't want, I think, police officers using 3530 of the penal law to go out and kill somebody when they believe the person has committed a violent felony, because that permits the police officer to, decide, well, I'm going to kill this person. I'm going to be the judge. I'm going to be the jury. I'm going to be the executioner. There won't be a trial. He's dead. Bye. And so, this is a problem. Even if the police officer, could present a defense if he were charged under state law, because of the, he's affecting the arrest of somebody that he believes has committed a violent felony, we still don't want them to do it. Unless the officer, reasonably believes it's necessary to prevent or terminate the use of threatened physical or deadly physical force to himself or a third person. So this is why I'm saying that it's different to have a defense if a police officer is charged or could be charged, and what the policy should be for the city of White Plains.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying we should?
We can't change. At least we should have a more stringent policy than that which is permitted as a defense if an officer were investigated for committing a murder, a killing, homicide. Because we're talking about the use of deadly physical force.
So how do you think this should be written?
Well, it's right in the policy there, right? That they should not use deadly physical force to arrest or kill a person the officer thinks has committed a violent felony, right? And
Okay.
officers are permitted to use deadly force. See where it says written, officers are, all caps, only permitted to use deadly physical force as stated in section 1 of the policy when he reasonably believes it's necessary to prevent or terminate the threatened imminent use of deadly physical force against himself or a third party, or to prevent serious physical injury to himself or a third party.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if the person is, pointing a gun at somebody or waving a gun around, I mean, there's a danger to the public that this person might shoot somebody. Yes. Okay. We want the police officers to be in a position to use deadly physical force to protect himself or the public from somebody who is armed and dangerous. But if the person is, say, running away from a police officer, and the police officer says, like, well, he committed a violent felony, like that is, he robbed somebody, right? It's a VFO, violent felony offense. We think he's the guy who slugged the old man and stole his wallet, and he's running down the street. He committed a violent felony offense, right? We don't want the officer to take both hands, aim his pistol, and shoot that guy in the back, even if it could be permitted under the penal law. We don't want that because, first of all, we're not 100% sure that he really did do it. Secondly, we don't necessarily think the person ought to be killed because they committed a VFO. And third, that bullet discharged from that firearm could hit the little old lady who's walking down Mamaroneck Avenue, right? Or somebody's kid.
No, good points.
So this is why I'm suggesting that even though there could be a defense, we should still limit, our officers to using it when it's necessary to terminate the threatened use of deadly physical force to the police officer or to the public. That's when we really want them to be able to use it. We don't want them to well, I think that guy committed a felony. First of all, the cop could be wrong, and maybe he's not the right guy. And then we have a dead person. It's too late to take it back.
No, you're right. No, I agree with you on this. It should definitely be used. That's similar to the pursuit policy. I know White Plains Police, at least when I was there, the pursuit policy was no pursuits. We don't chase cars. But that's kind of state law. State law says, I'm sure you could pursue a vehicle that's fleeing for whatever reason. But White Plains Police, nope, no pursuits, because that car ends up hitting people.
It's dangerous as hell.
Yep.
That's why. You're liable. You're likely to. The car that you're chasing is likely to run off the road and hit somebody.
Exactly.
Or slam into some other car. Not even the police, but the guy you're chasing.
Yep.
So, all right. So the next thing is the topic of investigation on page 2.
Mhm.
Here's where it says the Office of Professional Standards will conduct an investigation of all complaints, and all reports will be handled by the Office of Professional Standards and forwarded to the police chief. So, this is where we just say, look, there should be a CCRB established by law to investigate complaints of excessive force, parallel to internal investigations and investigations by the DA or the state attorney general. In some instances, the attorney general has been appointed to conduct police misconduct investigations involving homicides in New York State. I know that's
Yeah.
happened recently.
Yeah,
For
that
example,
happened.
in
Yeah, I think it happened
Rochester.
5 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they appointed somebody. There was the guy who was mentally ill, who was with a spit bag over his head in Rochester.
Yeah.
I think Letitia James is appointed anyway. And then I say that the investigations and findings should be copied to the mayor and or the city council. But just because if you have a finding, we would like that finding to become public when there's an investigation of excessive force. We
Now,
want,
now, do you think the CCRB should do the investigation, or should a CCRB review the professional standards investigation? Like in Albany, they have a CCRB, but what they do, they don't do the investigation. The professional standards does the investigation. Then they turn the report over to the CCRB. They review the report to make sure it was the investigation was done. It was a thorough investigation. It was fair, and they cross all the T's and dot all their I's. And if they don't like it, they go back to them like, listen, you missed a few things here. And if they don't agree on it, then the CCRB goes to the mayor and the city council. Hey, we have a problem. But they don't do the investigation themselves. They review the case once it's finalized by the CCRB. I mean, by the professional standards.
I don't know that we can get into the weeds of exactly, what the CCRB is going to be authorized to do, because we're not writing that legislation.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably we would like the CCRB to be able to have its own subpoena power, conduct its own hearings, make its own recommendations and so forth, in parallel to whatever is done by internally with the police department. But, I think it's getting into more than we need to for this particular policy.
Yeah, I just asked that because you have CCRB established, to investigate the complaints. I wasn't sure they can investigate the complaints or investigate
I think that the investigation that takes place about an officer takes a lot into consideration that the CCRB may not have access to immediately, right? So they may have to still deal with the department to find out how that officer is performing, to do 360 on the officer's performance based on what the issue was or based on some history. I think all of those things have to be taken into consideration, and to say that everything has to come out of the CCRB is maybe limiting, especially at this time, as you say, Richard, when we're not even deciding on what that process or group even is or does.
Yeah, that's why I said in parallel to internal investigations and investigations by the DA or the state attorney general, because the internal investigation would be the investigation by Office of Professional Standards. So we don't really have a CCRB, so it's all kind of ephemeral right now as to what powers that they would have if they existed. We don't even know.
Okay.
I just think, we want to say something about the process. If we don't have a CCRB, the process should be open to the public and reported to law enforcement outside of the White Plains Police Department. And that's it for response to resistance.
So Richard, should it be open to the public or accountable to the public?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. What do you want to say?
I think accountability is more important than open to the public. I think that it's important that the public have the ability to make sure that the process is accountable to the public versus just being able to hear about it.
Okay, what do you
Yeah.
think? Does everybody else agree that we should change open to accountable?
Yeah, it works.
I'm not sure I understand what that means, open to accountable.
Well, if you look at, this is the comment to the investigation recommendation, where I say complaints of excessive force should be investigated by a CCRB. Until a CCRB is established, the process of investigating these complaints should be open to the public and reported to law enforcement outside the White Plains Police Department. And so what Bernie is saying, maybe it should say the process of investigating these complaints should be accountable to the public as opposed to open to the public.
Accountable to the public.
Yeah, meaning that the information has to come back to the public. It's not just that the public gets to hear about it, but they get to question it and also interpret whether the information is enough or whether the process is enough. So it's not just that there's somebody reporting to the public saying, oh, this is what happened and this is what was done. You should be satisfied in hearing what is done, but it should be able to be scrutinized by the public.
So do you think we should say the process of investigation should be accountable to the public?
I believe so.
I'm like 50-50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about made known to the public?
Made known is the same as, to me, being open to the public. Being accountable is that there has to be some solution brought to it as per the public satisfaction.
Right, but if the
there's a
public doesn't know
CCRB or
about
whatever's in
these,
place.
they have to know about them before they could,
Well, how
Hold it.
about, accountable to the public and maybe reported publicly?
That would work as long as the accountable to is there. That works.
yeah.
Works for me.
Okay, so it says should be accountable to the public and reported to law enforcement and outside the White Plains the police department. And how about we add the results of any investigation should be made public?
Yes.
Okay. So that completes that.
Okay, so we've gone through body worn cameras, field stops. We haven't done the firearm. We've done response to resistance. And you had last unbiased policing, correct? Was that you?
This is the one that I sent out to everybody last week. It's just I haven't really changed it, but the unbiased policing were that recommendations were that officers are required to intervene at the time of the incident, not suggested. So let's turn to the policy very briefly. Let's see if we can do this one quickly. Okay, so we start off with It's policy 1702, page 2. Turn to page 2, section 4B. Okay, so this talks about shall report and
To report the incident to the supervisor, is it under number 1?
yeah, it's B1, 4B1.
Yes.
Um,
Officers who witness or who are aware of incidents of biased policing should report the incident to a supervisor.
yeah, and then it
Also,
says
where appropriate,
that's
officers
it.
are encouraged to intervene at time the biased policing incident occurs.
Yeah, and I want to change that, or I'm recommending that we change that to required to intervene. I mean, I just don't think that encouraged to intervene is enough. I think that they have it. We want police officers to intervene. In other words, you know, you're with a partner and he says something, you know, that violates the policy, you know, without offending anybody to suggest what that might be. We want the other officer to say, like, hey, stop that. You know, we want a protest. You know, we want it to be the policy, I think, that, you know, that should not be, you know, just overlooked.
All right, so you
You
say it
know,
should be required.
right now it's encouraged.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I agree. They should
as
definitely,
opposed to encouraged.
yeah, because that you know, they don't, if you say encourage, they don't do anything about it. The damage that could cause could be, you know, could be crucial. So
Right, because he could, you know, the police officer could say, well, I was encouraged to, but I didn't do it. Okay,
yeah.
because I wasn't required, I was encouraged.
Mhm.
Right, so that's the first one. The next one is 4B2 and 3. Current policy permits supervisors to decide whether internal or external complaints should be referred to OPS. And, you know, what I'm thinking is that supervisors should report these things, these incidents to OPS and the chief, as opposed to letting the supervisors decide, you know, no, I don't need to. You
No,
know,
I
I think
agree.
it's,
I
you
think
know,
yeah, they should. Even if he handles it at his level, he should still report it up. Just let them know this is what happened. This is what I did about it.
yeah. I mean, we're not necessarily saying that, you know, every incident needs to result in some, you know, really serious sanction, but it should, you know, it shouldn't just stop at the supervisor. You know, other people in the department should learn of it. You know, and I think that we all agree that the reason for that is, you know, over the course of time, you could see numerous complaints being directed at a particular officer, and we're not cool with that.
Yeah, and that one supervisor may not know that, you know, I'm this guy's fourth supervisor, and every supervisor had at least 1 or 2 complaints. I don't know that. I'm thinking this might be the
Right,
first time this happened. But the
right.
chief and OPR would know if this guy has been a, you know, constant, frequent flyer with complaints. So yeah, I think it should.
So is this also something that should be part of that internal reporting process that some system accounts for? I mean, because it's all about it almost is. It's not the complaint, but the miss or the officer's poor performance. Does that then fall into how does that get handled now?
Yeah,
How does poor performance
Well, they have
get
yearly
handled now?
reviews. I mean, you know, that the officers go through, but that's a lot of times just, you know, satisfactory. You know, nobody wants to you know, for the most part, they just sort of like pass the guy along. But I think there should be a process where that everything that comes in, if the boss handles it or not, it should still be reported to, you know, professional standards and to the chief. Everything.
So if it went
right.
into some system and it's reflected in some system as a report, it could get kicked out as a general report to the chief or some hire a supervisor, right?
Yeah, and
Whether,
who knows?
what,
I think OPR may have a system. Maybe it's just we put professional standards, like OPR,
yeah,
professional standards, and then they just put it in their database, and at least it's there, so they can always. Oh, this is the fourth one we have with this officer over the last 3 years, and 3 different bosses.
yeah, from my understanding from speaking to Chief, that type of system, and even from speaking to Spencer, that does not exist right now.
Okay, well, it should exist. So it does just cost
It's
a lot of
in
money.
process. It's in process that it exists, but there's no. So, for example, if the chief got replaced right away, a new chief wouldn't know. He'd have to come up to speed with learning it versus it being in some report as to the nature and character of performance of his staff.
Yeah.
So if there was a solid system there, a database, so to say, that was managed, that report would get kicked out all the time. You know, you get a monthly report on performance of officers. Period.
Well, take a look at page 2, B4. It says, this is the policy. It says the Office of Professional Standards shall maintain data relating specifically to complaints of bias policing. Information shall be provided to the chief of police or designated authority in a manner most suitable for the administrative review, problem identification, and development of appropriate corrective action. So that's in the current policy. What we're suggesting in a change to that is that there should be a database, not just data, but there should be a database.
Yes.
And also, the previous policy is that, supervisors need to report any such incidents into that database, right? To OPS for inclusion in that database so that things don't get swept under the rug. And then now there's they're like, okay, well, let's take a look at Officer X. Oh, look, there were 4 complaints, of biased policing against this officer, over the last 3 years. We now know that because we have a database.
Exactly. And
Yes.
and even if the sergeant handles all 4 complaints they were all handled locally by the sergeant, at least you have that information in a database.
Yes, absolutely. That accountability makes
Right.
a hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah. Right. So that's why in the recommendation we have is consistent with the recommendations on the personnel complaint, which you're going to get to, Bernie. There should be a database on all reported such incidents.
Okay.
So that's the only thing I have on unbiased policing.
All right, gentlemen, ladies, it's like 2 hours now. We gotta
I
go.
know.
Well,
I'm
the question is,
ready to ring off for now.
Do we want to, Janice?
Yes, I'm here.
We've been on for 2 hours now. Do we want to try to reschedule one last session together? I think that we've covered a lot. What does the group think?
I think 2 hours is a long time for us,
Yeah, I
attentiveness.
think 2 hours is a long time, but I don't think we're done.
No, we're not
No.
done.
Oh, I don't
Yeah,
think we're done either.
No, so I think we definitely have to have another meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We start to hear
So,
from
let's-
Marlene and
Yeah.
Yeah, and yourself, Janice, because I know that you sent out your document. I just wanted to point out that I know in my conversation with Richard and Marie earlier that we're going through these policies, but in addition to the policies, we have recommendations that are beyond just the policies, i.e. what you sent us, Janice, right? And we want to make sure that we cover that type of stuff also, in addition to stuff that Richard had sent in addition. So I think that we not only need time to go through 1 or 2 other policies that we have left open, but there's some additional stuff that we need to cover. Am I not correct, Janice, that you have, from the documents that you sent, that you want to make sure that we cover within our purview, correct?
Sure. I've sent in some recommendations. I'm looking at, some of them are a little redundant. We've covered them. Richard has covered some, Marie has covered some, but I still think that, we need to go over the others.
So let
Because
us,
everything that, I'm not sure if everything that we have discussed is going to make the cut as far as being part of the final recommendation. So that's what I want to make sure. Everything that we've talked about is definitely a final recommendation?
I think that everything that we've talked about so far absolutely needs to be part of the,
Okay,
no ifs, ands, from my point of view, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I
okay.
think
Well,
absolutely it's detailed
some
enough
of the
for
ones
that.
that I've come up with, some of the ones that I've put down, I'm not sure. That's why I want to talk about it. Because,
Okay,
I mean, I want to hear what you guys think. Maybe you don't think so. Maybe you do. I don't know.
okay, very good. And once again,
Janice,
yes.
Yes,
is there a way for you to let us know which ones you're questioning ahead of time? So at least when we meet, we can already know ahead of time
sure.
and we can look it over. Okay. Well, I guess, yeah, if you just send out an email, I know yours aren't labeled or numbered, but if you could just send out an email earlier so we could just look
What
at
do
it,
you
and
mean
that way,
what do you mean when you say aren't labeled? What do you mean?
when I said aren't numbered, because you have a very long one, so they're not numbered. So if
Oh, I see what you're
and some
saying.
of them have like the same, like
Okay.
some of the initials are like TWC and things like that. But if
Uh-huh.
you could just pull out exactly which ones you want us to look over, so we could just jump straight into it and not have to necessarily read it, but we could just jump straight to which ones are the ones that you're questioning,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Maybe,
Let me
maybe
know.
Janice, if you just went to the top of it and on one, I know what's in the document that we originally used, we have like a page number or a section number. If you just put down one,
Well,
for each.
mine are not coming from the policies.
No, I understand that, but the only thing I'm saying is in order for us to reference what you're doing, if you're going to do it top down, then we'll look at it top down. I think that that's what Marilyn is referring to, so that we're able to say, if you say on the first page, this item covers this, just as Richard has it, he has down. I know it's not the same, but if you had that, we are looking at 1 through 5 or 1 through 3 and skip number 4 and then look at 5, that may help instead of you having to rewrite them all over again. That's
No,
just
no,
a
no. I'm
recommendation.
not saying rewrite them. I'm just simply saying add a column with numbers. That's it. So if you have like 20, it's just 1 through 20, and you'll say go to number 2. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I sent out Janice's
Yeah, condensed version.
recommendation so that they're all together one document. It's like page 1 through 6. So if you refer to, something on page 1, page 3, whatever, I think
Yeah,
we have
that's
it, in a form that is easier to deal with.
Okay, so I want to be the first to start off when we get back to cover a personnel complaint. But when is a good day for us to get back together again? The day after New Year's? Is everybody going to be sane and able to walk correctly?
What day is that?
Saturday?
That would be
Sunday.
Saturday. How about Sunday?
That's what I said.
You said Saturday.
You said Saturday.
I said Saturday. Oh, I meant Sunday. The day after.
The day after New Year's. Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's right. It's Saturday. What about Sunday?
yeah.
Works for me.
Sunday
Yeah.
would be good.
Our
All right.
same bat time, 10:30.
Same bat channel.
Okay. So we'll
Okay.
ask Karen to set that up for us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I
Very
think
good.
that very good.
Can we commit to, getting through everything?
I think we will.
I got
think
an
we only
hour and a
have-
half that day, so that's it,
Yeah, I think we should be finished by the end of that because we only have one. I think maybe one other policy behind that to do. I know that Merlene's comments.
I
you wanna
talk
get
really
in?
fast, so that's not a problem for me. I talk really fast.
Okay, and I'll talk fast also.
Okay, all right, see you all Sunday at 10:30.
Sunday,
Happy New
10:30.
Year.
Happy
Thank
New
you.
Year.
Yep.
Happy New
Happy
Year.
New Year.
Take care.
Happy New
Good
Year.
night.
Happy New Year.